is Mayor David Stahl. Welcome to another edition of Total East Brunswick. First, I want to welcome everyone to 2011 and hope everyone had a wonderful celebration during the past holidays, and I wish all of us the best for 2011. I'm pleased to be joined with Congressman Rush Holt here in studio today, who is representing the 12th District, of which obviously East Brunswick is a part. The Congressman has been in Congress since 1999. He serves on the Committee on Education and Labor, the Committee on Natural Resources, and the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. And of course, obviously, with the new Congress to be sworn in a few weeks, your committee's positions may change. But it's been a busy session for you last session, Congressman.
Yes, well, it's good to be with you, Mayor. It's always good to be in East Brunswick, and I thank you for having me. And I hope you and everyone in East Brunswick has a good new year.
You're absolutely right, and I apologize. I hope everything went well for you and the family as well.
The snow, I'm still digging, as we tape this, I'm still digging out.
It's one of the niceties of New Jersey. We get the beautiful summers, but we get a little bit of snow.
Yes, everybody thinks members of Congress have lots of people who drive for them and shovel snow for them, and no, I take out the garbage and I shovel the snow too. That's right.
The last couple of weeks have been incredibly busy down in Washington, D.C. Let's talk about some of the legislation that recently passed.
Well, it's actually the entire session, the two-year Congress, has been really quite busy. A number of accomplishments in consumer protection, in education, in safety, a variety of things. So airliners and pilots will be safer now. Food safety. There's consumer protection in credit card dealings. In other words, your credit card statement each month that used to be unintelligible will now be more consumer friendly, and the consumer will have more rights. In financial dealings of all kinds, whether it's mortgages or loans, everything, there will be real consumer protections built in. This was part of what was known as Wall Street reform, but it had more to do, I think, with consumer protection even than Wall Street reform. In education, student loans for college have much lower interest rates. The Pell Grants are much larger. There are scholarships. Well, for example, something that I wrote would be scholarships for students who want to go into teaching math, science, or foreign languages. They can get $16,000 up front, $4,000 a year for 4 years, if they agree to teach after college. There have been, there's quite a bit to help small businesses, particularly those that are research intensive, but also small businesses that provide health care for their employees, any small business. So there's quite a bit of legislation. I'd also like to mention the Child Nutrition Act, which is something that we did toward the end of the session, which will not only make school food healthier, more healthful, but it will have a farm-to-school component, legislation that I wrote, language in this child nutrition bill that I introduced, that will be good for New Jersey and actually all states, but particularly for the Garden State, where fresh produce will come from local farms to the school cafeteria. That will help not only with the obesity problems, but it actually has real educational benefits too. Most kids don't know that food doesn't come from a box. So.
That's true. Actually, the kids love taking the field trips to the farms.
Yeah.
And I know in dealing with many farmers, and we do have a lot of farms here in East Brunswick, it's good for them to then have the resource or the ability to take their food directly to the
Well, it's it's a dedicated, it's a reliable market. Right. You know, if they know they've got this school cafeteria using their produce, that's economically good for the farmer too.
In terms of, I guess it was the tax legislation that was just recently passed, what's the impact on that to both the middle class and, let's say, the middle class here in East Brunswick?
Yeah, the marriage penalty removal is continued. The child tax credit is continued. The alternative minimum tax is fixed. That's something that hits a lot of New Jerseyans. And if it weren't fixed, if it were allowed to expand as it was scheduled to do, the alternative minimum tax would have taken really thousands of dollars from thousands of New Jerseyans. So in addition to the tax rates that you heard about, of course the big debate was about whether there should be lower rates for people of higher incomes, above $200,000 or $300,000. But in addition to that, there will be, starting January 1, less money withheld from the paycheck for every worker. So the wage tax, the Social Security tax, instead of 6.2% will be 4.2%. So if you earn $100,000, then that's a couple $1,000s extra in your pocket for the year. Now I see real problems with the way that's done in this law. Nevertheless, it should have a stimulative effect for the economy.
Right, I could say, because even in my own business, I got from my accountant the new withholding taxes for my employees, and you can see already that they're going to take home more wages, which again should hopefully stimulate the economy, so it should be a good thing.
Yeah, I have a real problem with the way it's done. I think it puts Social Security at risk in the long run. Not just the loss of revenue. Obviously, this 6.2% is your contribution, the worker's contribution to that worker's Social Security account. So withholding only 4% instead of 6% means Social Security is not getting the revenue that Social Security should get. But the real problem, I think, is that it treats Social Security like all of the other things that were on the table, like the AMT and the Earned Income Tax Credit and the child tax credit and the Bush tax rates. There was all this trading and dealing to put together this tax bill, and Social Security was part of it. Well, if Social Security is just an item to be traded, and some years you use it to balance the budget, and some years you use it to stimulate the economy, then it loses its special status. And without that special status, I'm afraid that the political support for Social Security will evaporate.
I also think if I use New Jersey almost as an example, with both Republican and Democratic governors, where they've over the years played games with our pension
with the pensions, right?
I mean, that's what's strangling right now. Quite frankly, as mayor, I'm no different from the other 500 plus mayors. We are strangled by the pension, which has been, as you said,
which should have been sacrosanct,
right? But
it wasn't. And when Franklin Roosevelt and Francis Perkins set up Social Security 70 odd years ago now, it was explicitly a wage insurance program. So each person felt some ownership of his or her Social Security account. And it was this really ingenious, shrewd rationale that FDR gave to Social Security when he said we should not use tax revenue, regular income tax or other Treasury revenue for Social Security. It gave it a special status that has helped it withstand the enemies that it has had over the decades. And so Social Security is an important program that we need to save. And I'm worried that this tax package opens the door for dealing with Social Security. In other words, dealing on the table. And this year we'll give some, next year we'll take some, whatever. And that doesn't bode well for the long-term future of Social Security, I'm afraid. So I think we'll have to fix that.
I would agree with that. Another biggest thing that was accomplished last year, obviously, had to do with health care.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your feelings on healthcare and where do you see it going with the new Congress that's coming in? Well,
first of all, there are a number of things that we've done in addition to the famous healthcare reform law. The state children's health insurance program was shored up. And this is for low-income children to make sure that they get, and not so low income either, to make sure that they get health care. That was done a year and a half ago. Assistance for caregivers of disabled veterans. It's not exactly health care, but that's important to the health of families. So there are a number of other things like that, some other veterans' health care matters. But in the main health care legislation, which is now taking effect, it certainly helps families where the kids are just out of college and not yet able to start jobs that provide good health insurance. It makes sure that families aren't victimized by insurance companies who decide that, well, they're becoming too expensive to the insurance company. A lot of people tell me, oh, I have good insurance, I don't need this new health care reform. And I said, well, that means you haven't been sick, doesn't it? Right. And they say, no, that's not what I said. I said I have good health insurance. And I said, well, you think you have good health insurance because the insurance company hasn't come to you and said, you're becoming too expensive for us. We're going to cut your policy, or rescind, as the word they use, your policy. This prevents that. The insurance company can't apply a cap. You might say, oh, I'll never run into $1 million of health benefits. One car accident, one strange disease, one unfortunate occurrence in your family, right, and you could exceed the cap that the insurance company arbitrarily puts on the policy. That's out. They can't do that now. If you have a child with diabetes, you cannot be denied health insurance because that child has a pre-existing condition. All of those things will really take effect. And of course, what most people are asking me nowadays, well, but what about my premiums going up? Mm-hmm. The fact that your premiums, mine too, are going up this year is, I think, a good indication that this health care law was needed, because the insurance company, the companies were going to raise those premiums anyway. They are now using the new health care law as an excuse, right, and blaming it on that. But it just goes to show that these companies were going to raise the rates anyway, and that's why we need to be tough with those companies. That's why this health care legislation was needed. And through a variety of improvements, more emphasis on primary care, more emphasis on prevention, there are a number of ways that this bill will help put a lid on the increase in health care costs for years to come. Some of the new members have come to Congress saying their goal is to repeal the health care law. I think as the public begins to say, well, sure, repeal the health care law, but don't take away this consumer protection against insurance companies, and don't take away this 26-year-old's ability to be on my family policy, and don't take away the annual visit under Medicare for your annual checkup with your doctor, and don't take away, well, pretty soon they're going to say, well, yeah, you can repeal the health care law, but don't take away any parts of it. Right. Because these parts of the health care law are good. And furthermore, the people who come to Congress now, some of the new members who say they want to repeal the health care law, they say they want to do it to save money. What they don't realize is the health care law is fully paid for, and it will actually make money. The savings in health care waste and the revenue that is raised through this health care law will actually more than pay for the additional cost of it. So you repeal it, it ends up costing taxpayers money.
An issue that you've worked hard on that unfortunately at the last minute was defeated, I think, in the Senate, dealing with the tragic passing of a local East Brunswick resident, Sergeant Coleman Bean, who served a number of tours in Iraq, was a member of the individual Ready Reserve, did not get the medical treatment that he needed and actually tried to get through, I guess, the Department of Defense. You worked hard in trying to prepare legislation on that to protect that in the future. Let's talk a little bit about that.
When I talked with Greg and Linda Bean, the parents of Sergeant Bean, I promised them that I wouldn't stop until we had done everything we could to prevent this sort of thing from happening to other soldiers, to other veterans, to other families. I have legislation that would require for people like Sergeant Bean, who was in the Individual Ready Reserve, as you point out, it would allow for trained counselors to check in with them at least every 90 days to see how they're doing. This is between tours. If they're on active duty, they are well supervised, and right now, in the last couple of years, the Defense Department, the Army, the Navy, they've all gotten much more attuned to mental health. They're paying a lot more attention. We're not there yet with the kind of mental health coverage, the kind of mental health attention that we need throughout our society. But the military has come a long way. But if you're in the Individual Ready Reserve, you can fall through the cracks. That was the phrase that Greg Bean used about his son. He fell through the cracks. He was waiting for an appointment with the VA. He was eligible for calling, back to duty for his what would have been a third tour in Iraq. He had already been diagnosed with PTSD, but there was nobody really looking after him. And by having somebody check in regularly and making sure that the reservist, that the veteran gets attention if needed, it would not only prevent suicides, but I think it would help their adjustment to civilian life in a variety of ways. And we had it in the defense bill. It's passed the House twice, and to my dismay, the Senate stripped it out at the 11th hour, the 11th hour and 59th minute. Right. I mean, just as Congress was about ready to adjourn and we were passing the defense authorization bill, the Senate stripped out the suicide prevention part. I had I guess you'd call it a shouting match with Senator McCain over this. I can't imagine why they were doing it.
I agree. Our veterans give so much to this country. I mean, we have been at war for so many years, almost decades now. The demands on them, not only, as you said, during their service, but when they're back home, it's just unbelievable. And to think that our country is not providing the resources and to meet the needs of these soldiers and their families, to me, I just don't understand it myself. Yeah,
and it would cost some millions of dollars, maybe $5 or $10 million. We're spending billions to have spare backup jet engines for the new fighter planes, billions. I mean, the least we can do for the soldiers is make sure they have good health care, including mental health care.
I agree, and hopefully you'll be more successful. Obviously you've been working very hard at it, and I know that you're going to, as you said to the Beans, be persistent and make sure this thing eventually gets passed. And
and I should say, it's not just for veterans. I mean, one of the proud things we've done in this Congress too is pass with Patrick Kennedy's leadership, the son of the late Senator Kennedy, who is finishing his term in Congress now. Patrick is. We passed the mental health parity legislation so that we will improve all across the country mental health care in America. And that's really important too, not just for the veterans.
Sure. Another thing that was recently passed that will help folks here, even in East Brunswick, who responded back to the 9/11 tragedy years ago, was the 9/11 Workers' Health Benefit Bill that just was passed.
It was, again, 11th hour. This was something we did in the so-called lame duck session that a lot of people thought wouldn't get through. A lot of people were saying, well, this is a New York, New Jersey bill. Well, I mean, it is true that a lot of people from New York and New Jersey went to help with the rescue and the recovery. But people from every state volunteered or traveled hours across the country to help. And some of them ended up with serious respiratory diseases and other problems. And they deserve not just special thanks, but special attention because of it. And I think this legislation is a very good thing, and I think it will help.
I agree. I mean, anyone in my mind who says that a 9/11 responder is a New Jersey, New York problem, I would say then is the Statue of Liberty only part of New York and New Jersey?
Well,
or is that a symbol for our country?
Right, and as we said in the debate, we didn't hear anybody in January and February of 1942 saying, Pearl Harbor, that was a Hawaiian, that was a Hawaiian event.
Right.
No, this was America.
I agree.
Yeah.
Now, your district actually is very spread across the central part of New Jersey.
Yeah,
but
we were
again,
just looking at this map here. Some people say it's the prototypical gerrymander. I love it, though. 44 wonderful towns. East Brunswick is more or less in the center, east to west.
But you do so much for local East Brunswick residents. Again, you represent such a wide district, but East Brunswick residents have reached out to you. I'll just give a couple of examples of your ability to help our residents.
Well, I'm always looking for ways to do it. I try to help people who need it most, but anyone who calls me. And these could be problems with, it could be a veteran who, after the Second World War, didn't want to hang around for medals and ribbons or parades. He wanted to get on with his life, and now his grandson or great-grandson is saying, did you, and he said, well, yeah, I whatever happened to that medal? He'd call the congressman, and sometimes I can find it. Another East Brunswick man called me about an unfair tax penalty that had been levied on him, $1 million, and we were able to clear that up. He didn't know it. There was a case of an East Brunswick man who applied for Social Security benefits and found that just through an oversight, his earnings from 10 years before had not been recorded, and therefore his average salary as it was calculated and the number of quarters that he had worked left him short for retirement. And he called me. We were able to see that his previous earnings were properly recorded, and he then was in a better position for his Social Security retirement. So there are a number of things of that sort. I also try to help the town whenever I can, as you know,
right, sure.
Or the fire departments or the fire districts. For example, I have workshops to help fire companies apply for the fire grants through FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management. And East Brunswick has done well and gotten a couple of those grants. And they will tell you it's because of the workshops that we set up. Because filling out these applications to get the federal grant, you've got to know, not just the deadline, but you got to know what they'll fund this year that they didn't fund last year, or vice versa.
Plus the competition's fierce throughout the country.
And the competition is fierce. And so East Brunswick, the rescue folks got a $100,000 grant a year ago, and the fire companies have been able to get money for equipment also.
Right.
So I'm always looking for ways that I can help the town.
On a more of a personal type question, I mean, you've been in Congress for a number of years. What is it that you find that's still so interesting about being a congressman?
It's got to be the people. I mean, I represent more than 700,000 people. Now, under the new census with the redistricting, it'll be probably 730 or 40,000, something like that. It's slightly less than that right now, officially anyway. I've gotten to meet just some wonderful people, some people who are real heroes in daily life that I wouldn't have known, some people who are just really accomplished, with the things that they do, often to help other people, or maybe it's historic preservation, or working with youth recreation. Just some of the most imaginative wonderful people.
No, I agree.
So that's got to be the best part of it, and you understand that because we find them in East Brunswick.
It's true. I say to so many people that say, that thank me, as I'm sure they thank you for your public service. And I always say, you know what, we're actually getting more out of it because, as you said, we meet so many different people with so many different interests and ethnic backgrounds that on a personal level, I could just tell you, for myself, it's just been an unbelievable experience in dealing and learning so much about the people that call East Brunswick home, or people that call, the 12th District their home.
And it's very satisfying when you are able to help them. When I met with an elderly woman in South River the other day, her brother had died in action. And what was most important to her, most important thing in her life right now, was holding the Purple Heart that he earned. And of course, she had never gotten it. He was buried, I think, overseas. And I was able to get the Purple Heart and present it to her. It was just, it was a wonderful feeling. Or I mentioned this East Brunswick man who had a $1 million tax penalty levied against him that was wrong, and to be able to get that cleared up, I mean, he to see the load lifted off his shoulders was really wonderful.
What's it like for yourself? Obviously, you live in New Jersey. What's it like to commute up and back to Washington, D.C.?
Amtrak, always the train. And that's another thing I've done in this Congress, by the way, is to try to make Amtrak commuting fares better. But I've been a member a little over a decade now, and I think I've driven back and forth to Washington maybe 5 or 6 times in all of those years. The train is the way to go. I spend probably 3 nights a week when we're in session. I spend probably 3 nights a week in Washington, 4 nights a week in New Jersey. It is typically a 7-day week in this job, and just like a mayor, there's no closing time. You don't punch out, you don't punch the clock out. My number's in the phone book, and people will call me anytime. But I still get goosebumps when I come out of Union Station and see the Capitol Dome, or when I walk on a stairway in the Capitol, and I just think of some of the great people who have been there, and what a great experiment. And it is still an experiment. It's been going for more than 2 centuries now. It's a pretty successful experiment so far. But when I think just what an ingenious job the founders did, it really fills me with pride.
We have about a minute to go. What is your expectations for the next Congress?
Oh, it's hard to say. There are a number of new members, and I think, making up a new majority now in the Republican Party. I think the Republican leader will have trouble corralling them because many of them, they ran very hard to win a seat in the government in which they detest. So it'll be interesting to see how they respond, because they ran on an anti-government platform, and now they're there. Are they there to tear it down? Are they there to improve it? It'll be interesting to see how this works.
I agree. I think a lot. You hear a lot of campaign rhetoric, but as you said, now it's time to govern, and let's see what we're going to do.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to do what I've always done. I'm a scientist by background. I dwell more on evidence than ideology, and I hope to continue to do that.
And you do it very well. Obviously, the voters of the 12th District think so, having returned you back to Congress for yet another term.
Well, thanks, Dave.
All right. I appreciate you spending the time with us today here. And, I would encourage our residents, if there's an issue, you can contact Congressman Russ Holt's office, and he will be glad to have himself or his staff, look into whatever your issue is. Again, I thank you for watching, and have a great new year for 2011, and have a great time. Thank you very much.